Welcome back. My name is Chris, and in this video, I want to give you an introduction to NetSuite's WMS, which stands for Warehouse Management System. WMS is an upgrade to NetSuite's native inventory management capabilities, and what I'm going to do in this video is really walk you through some of the core functionality, and closer to the end of the video, I'll talk about the pros and cons of NetSuite WMS, as well as some things to think with if you're intending to implement it. So with all of that in mind, let's jump into it. All right, so here we are in NetSuite, and I first off just want to point out I am in the warehouse manager role. WMS does come with numerous roles, but this is one of what I would consider one of the most important roles for this product. And there's really three things I want to point out here in this tab bar. We have WMS inbound, outbound, and inventory. And I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. This is really the entire spectrum of inventory. Inbound is how we're receiving things from our vendors or suppliers. Inventory management is how we're actually managing the widgets or items, whatever we have in the warehouse. That can be things like cycle counts or adjustments, bin-to-bin transfers, transfer orders to different locations, any replenishments. There's so many different things that can be incorporated in there. And then once we have our orders coming in from our clients or customers, that's the point where we have outbound, which is arguably the most important part of it, sending things out to our clients. So these three are the pillars of inventory and certainly WMS. So with that in mind, let's now actually dive into the app, which is really what any picker on the warehouse floor is going to be utilizing. Now, I do have a scanner right here, and I'm going to show you how this works a little bit later in this video. But for the sake of this tutorial and the fact that most people are watching this on a normal desktop screen, it's not the easiest to see it on a mobile app where it's kind of crunched into one corner of the screen. I think it's easier to just see it full screen. And NetSuite does provide that capability. They have a mobile emulator over here. The functionality is identical. It's just on a widescreen as opposed to on a mobile app. Nothing else is different between the two. So understand that everything I'm showing you here is going to be identical to what you would do on the mobile app. Just keep that in mind. So I'm going to hit Control and click on that. I do Control click because if you just hit normal click, it actually kind of puts you into the mobile app and you can't back out. So if you want to be able to go back to your normal UI, you just need to make sure you hit that Control click. And we're going to come over here, and now this is what the mobile app looks like. So we've got WMS over here and Ship Central. Now I know it's a little bit of a misnomer because this is all technically WMS, but you're going to see this is really handling the inbound side of things as well as inventory management and picking. And then when we want to deal with packing and shipping, you have to really go through the history of how this software was developed, but that was all part of what was called Ship Central, which again, if you're buying WMS, you're generally buying those both together, but technically the packing and shipping is a different product called Ship Central, which is all combined here. So you see WMS on the left, Ship Central on the right, and then again, you really should see Smart Count, which is a kind of an addition and a little bit of an alternative to normal cycle counting. You can do smart counts for like spot check counting. And if you want to have tolerance ranges for your cycle counts, you can deal with that on smart count. Really, this should be contained within WMS next to cycle counts. But just again, historically, the way these things have been developed, it gets kicked out as its own. The only reason the icon is not displaying, I believe that's because I'm in the Redwood UI as opposed to what you consider the normal old school UI. I just don't think they've correctly made that image, so it's appearing weird here. But the functionality of the product does work perfectly fine. So to start off, let's get into the inbound side of things. So we're going to come to WMS. First thing it's going to ask us in every instance is what location are you even dealing with? So as you can see here, it looks like we've got 3 locations that are configured for WMS. You can have more locations, but if they're not configured to be part of WMS, you wouldn't see them here. So I don't have anything prepared. I'm just going to go with what we have here. We're going to click on US 1. Let's say that's our Detroit location. So we are a picker in Detroit in the warehouse on the floor, and we want to go through the receiving process. So you can see I have receiving right here. I'm going to click on that. Now I'm clicking with the mouse, but generally with the scanner, you'd be hitting the touch screen and they would all pull up with that. So we have a few different ways that we can receive. There's a lot of different options here. Now in the course, I go through all of this. I'm going to keep it very simple for this tutorial. We're just going to do a normal receipt of a purchase order. We ordered, let's say, some widgets from our vendor. We're now receiving that. So I'm going to come to purchase order. And it's going to say, okay, great. We're assuming this thing has just come in from a shipment. So you could scan that. But we also have the ability to select from various lists. So I could look at just a list of all purchase orders and choose what I want to receive amongst that list. So you can see the PO number here, the vendor, and you can see we have the number of line items for this order. So let's just take the first one on the list, PO 612. So opening that up, it then says, okay, great. Which item are we dealing with specifically? Now, in this case, there's only one item as part of this order, but if you had 15, the question becomes, oh, which item are you receiving first as part of this? So you would scan the barcode on that item. In this case, I'm just gonna click right over here. So we've got this NST, etc. Again, let's just call that a widget. So we're receiving this widget. We've currently received 0 of it, and we need to receive 5. There should be 5 in front of us. So quantity remaining is 5 to pick. Now we do have inventory statuses currently set up in the system. So we have things like, is it good? Is it damaged, etc. We could change those statuses as needed. We can also change the units of measure. We have eaches right now. If you're dealing with cases or boxes of these things, you could go with that, or weight units of measure, whatever's relevant. So we're going to put in the quantity of 5. Now I could have a circumstance where, let's say we receive the 5, 1 is damaged, the remaining 4 are fine. I would come here, I would switch the status to damage, put in 1, receive that, then I would come back, receive the remaining 4 as good. So you do have the option to differentiate how you're receiving those, which is one of the benefits of going through this app. And now assuming we have received that, we've taken it, basically the shipments come in, we've received this thing. Now what we need to do is ultimately get it to the preferred bin, or you could say the recommended bin for this item, because it's gonna have a home, which is that preferred bin. But when you're dealing with WMS, there is an interim step, which is having a staging bin. So it goes from receipt to the staging bin. Oftentimes that'll be a cart that has bins within it that you can place it into, and then you can push the cart around to do the entire put away process. That's assuming that you're not just putting away one item at a time or one order at a time. You're gonna have a bunch of things loaded up, and then you can do a more efficient put away process. So first things first, we've received this thing, we need to put it into our staging bin. I'm just gonna select the first one. You might have multiple reasons for having different staging bins. Many businesses choose to just have one staging bin because they don't really want to go through the complexity of that. And at that point, it now ends off this order because we've completed that picking process for, again, this one item. Now, in this case, this order that we did, PO 612, it only had one item. So by completing that one line item, it also wrapped up the entire order. If it had multiple line items, we wouldn't come to this page. We would then go to the next item to pick as part of that purchase order receipt. So this is kind of like you've completed everything. Good. Now you can move on to the next purchase order that you want to receive. But we've understood how this works. I now want to show you, because we haven't gone to the final location. We've only gone to the staging bin. So now we need to do the final put away to the preferred bin. So let's look at that. I'm going to come over here to main menu so we can back out of where we currently are. Then we can go to receiving. And instead of doing purchase order, this is how we actually receive this thing to our staging bin. Now we need to go to put away, which allows us to take it from the staging bin to the final. We click on that. Now we can do it through a cart. We can do it through a bin put away, which is the concept more like a stationary bin. In this particular case, cart is not set up in this account, although I would say that's more frequently used. So we're just gonna go with bin put away because that's how this particular demo account is configured. So we've got this staging bin is the only one right now that has items ready for put away. So I'm gonna click on that. And one of the things that we see here, it looks like there was one from some previous iteration, but this is the one that we just received. So this comes up, we obviously had 5, it was good, great. We're gonna click on this. The idea also is that you'd be scanning all these things as you come across them. So in this case, I'm just clicking on it because I'm on the screen. Concept is very similar to what we just saw on the receiving part. I've got a quantity of 5. I can see the information here. We've got the units of measure. I'm gonna hit enter quantity on that, and it's gonna say what bin is this going to. This is gonna be, you could say, the final resting place, the preferred bin for this item. And you can see the inventory status is still good, which it should be. And I am going to scan. Now I could scan the barcode on the bin if you have that set up. I also have a listing of all the eligible bins below. Now, if there was a recommended bin for this item, it would be listed up here at the top. It'd be separated from everything else. So you know, great, that's the bin I should go to. In this case, it doesn't look that set up. So we have any of the eligible bins can be used. Let's say I wanna go with this Z1. So I'm gonna click on that. And that's really how that works. So we've now successfully taken it from that staging bin to the final bin. So that is the inbound process. Now, there are more variants to that, but I think you get the basic concept. So now let's take a look at the inventory management side of things. We're going to come to main menu. And instead of going to receiving, we can take a look at inventory. This is where we can see a lot of our options. We've got bin to bin transfers. We can create or adjust inventory, replenishments going from one storage bin to a picking bin. We can do cycle counts, transfers. Inventory transfers are like teleportations between two locations as opposed to doing a normal transfer order where you do the full pick, pack, ship process and the receiving process on the other end. We can change status. So we've got a lot of different options here. I'm not going to walk through all of these in this particular video because it's definitely out of the scope of this one, YouTube tutorial, but I think you get a concept of some of the capabilities that you can have here. Now, before we continue in the system, I do want to say the same day that I'm releasing this video, I'm also releasing a full-length course on WMS. In that course, I really dive into inbound inventory management, outbound, the setups for a WMS system. I really try to tackle it from all angles. So if you're interested in the subject, either for your own implementation standpoint, or potentially you're a consultant that wants to kind of bring that into your tool set, then by all means, I will have a link down below as well as up above on checking out that WMS course. So with that in mind, let's get back into it. So we've gone through the inventory management side of things. We now want to ship something out to a client. So we can come up here to picking. Few different ways you can handle this. In this particular case, I just want to keep it very simple. We're going to hit a single order picking. Multi-order is where you would have, let's say 20 orders, and you're going to be picking them all at once. And you can set up the system to make that a very efficient process as opposed to just go out for one order, come back, pack and ship that out, go out for one other order, etc. So I'm only doing single order just to keep it pretty simple in terms of you get a feel for how this system is working. In this particular case, I'm going to go with unreleased orders. So I want to deal with sales orders. We'll click on this. The other side of it was transfer orders. So if we're doing a transfer between two locations, I could click on that. But here is where we can see, now if we have a sales order in front of us, we could scan it, or if we have a pick sheet, we could scan the pick sheet, which would have the sales order number on it. But we also get a listing of all the eligible to pick single orders that are currently in the system. So those appear. Now it's just one for now. Oftentimes you'd have, 10 or 20 listed out here. So you can see we have sales order 877 for Riverboat Manufacturing. You're going to see it's quite similar, really just a mirror image of what we just dealt with on the receiving side. In this particular case, there's only the one pick task, which we see here for item NS, etc. So we only really need to pick one of those items. So this is a pretty simple example. I picked the top one off the list, kind of what was there. So unfortunately, this is not really that much more complex than this. Now, in this case, there is a recommended bin for this item. So it appears right here. We can also look at any alternative bins down below, any bins that have this item that could be picked. It looks like really it's only this one bin. The item is not located anywhere else. So not only is this list really isolated to one, but we have the recommended bin up above, and it looks like there's a quantity of 50 in that bin. So it's more than enough than we need for our one pick. So now we need to scan that bin or simply click on the touchscreen for the recommended bin. And it says, great, the idea is we're now at that bin. We've scanned it. We now need to scan the item. So this is the item that should be picked. We can scan that barcode or click it right here. And then it says, okay, great. How many of that item are you picking? We're picking one. The quantity is currently in good, so that's perfectly fine. One comment I want to make here, if you're picking, let's say 10 of the item, you can choose it where you scan it once and then you input the number, or you can have it where you scan it multiple times, like you're doing a grocery shopping. You scan it through the thing. That's called tally scanning. You can easily set that up in the system and it will function with that. So we have what we want here. I'm going to hit enter quantity. And just like that, it lets us know that that is now complete. Now, we can move on to other pick tasks if we want to, but I want to really say, okay, we're putting this away in the staging bin. Now, in this case, it's staging to go outbound as opposed to staging coming in, which they're separate bins. They would not be the same bin. So I want to move straight to that because I want to kind of rapidly move through this process. I'm going to hit go to staging in this case. So it says, great, which staging bin are you dealing with? We have pack station 1, pack station 2. Similar to what we're dealing with on receiving, we can scan the relevant staging bin. I'm going to stick with pack station number 1. So I click on that. And the idea is we've now taken it out of the bin it was in, this one item. We've put it in that pack station bin. It's now picked and ready for packing and shipping. In my full course, I will walk you through the entire pack process, ship process, etc. For the sake of just this YouTube video, we're gonna keep it much simpler. I'm not gonna walk you through that entire process. We're gonna do what's called a quick ship. Quick ship is basically where you take something that is picked and packed and just immediately ships it out without having to go through the entire process. It's a much simpler thing, so we're gonna do that. We're gonna hit main menu. We're gonna come back to picking, and we have our quick ship option right here. So I'm gonna click on that. In this particular case, we're gonna do a quick ship on a sales order, and we're gonna pull that. Now we could scan the sales order that's ready for quick ship, but I just wanna pull it from a list. So I'm gonna click select sales order, and it comes up, well, again, it looks like we've only got one item currently in the system that is both picked, packed, ready to ship. So we're gonna click this 851, which is going out to the customer Meats Inc. And it says, okay, great. So you're going to be shipping this thing out. Now this thing's already been packed in what's called a carton. Carton is a box. It really is just any receptacle that is housing the items that are going to be on the outbound line. So this is the carton that it was packed into. It looks like it has a weight of 5 pounds. You can see that on the right. So it's saying, great, is that the carton you're gonna be quick shipping out? It is, so we're gonna click on that. And at this point, because we're doing a quick ship, we need to input the tracking number, what we've received from our shipping carrier, so that this thing can be tracked. So we're gonna say, okay, great. The number that we received is 5678, and we're gonna hit enter tracking number. And it lets you know right there, sales order 851 with carton 23 shipped successfully. Great. So again, that's quick ship. That's a much more expedited process. You would not use that in every case by a long shot, but that just gives you some concept of all the way from receiving out to shipping, how that might work. So before we actually move on to the overview, kind of talking about WMS, the last thing I want to show you in the actual system is the mobile app. So let's go back to our NetSuite user interface. And to get really and configure and get the mobile app working, we need to actually go into our administrator role. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to switch to administrator. And on this page, now I have the capability to come over here to setup. And you can see if I scroll way down here to custom, I've got mobile login URL. So I can click on that. And basically what it's going to do, it brings me to this page and it gives me a URL. You got to keep in mind that NetSuite is a cloud-based ERP. It's not like NetSuite's installed on my computer. It accesses it through a browser. Same thing goes for the mobile app. You basically have your scanner, you get this URL onto your scanner. Like for example, I did it, you can either input it manually or I just have Gmail on the scanner. So I email this URL to myself. I then click it open on the Gmail. It opens up that link and it basically logs me into NetSuite. It says, what's your username or email that you're using? What's your password? You input those, great, you're in the system. Instead of going to NetSuite, like what we see here, which is the UI, it then brings us to, if I back out here, switch application, this is the first thing I would see. Once I log in, this is what I'm gonna be seeing because this is the URL that will trigger that. All right, so now that you've been able to take a look at how the WMS system operates, let's take a step back and talk about WMS more from an overview standpoint. And the first thing to understand is that NetSuite has really put a lot of effort into making WMS a product that can compete with some of the third-party alternatives. So really in the last 7 years, with almost every release, they've come out with some major improvements to the WMS system, functionality additions, enhancements, etc. So let's talk a little bit about what I would consider the pros and cons of WMS. And the number one thing that clients bring up in terms of why they get WMS is hands down the mobile scanner. If you're just dealing with NetSuite's inventory management module, which has a fair amount of capability, there's many clients and instances where you just need a mobile scanner and you cannot use that or you cannot be able to set that up when you're dealing just with normal NetSuite inventory management. So they go on to WMS for that functionality and sometimes solely for that functionality. They want nothing else from WMS, but they do want that mobile scanner. So that is one thing to think with. And really in addition to that, there are major enhancements and upgrades in terms of just the general functionality when you're dealing with WMS compared to NetSuite's inventory inventory management. It gives you, instead of just having a drop-down menu, changing it from pick to pack to ship, you can go through the entire picking process. You can have a much more sophisticated picking strategy as well as put away plan when you're dealing with your warehouse. You can set up zones and try to make things more efficient in your picking process, etc., etc. These are all reasons that if you have those requirements, you may want to consider moving up from normal NetSuite inventory management to something like WMS. In addition to that, it is a cheaper alternative, especially when you're comparing it to the alternative third-party apps. NetSuite's WMS is definitely cheaper. Now, it can range in terms of price. It depends on many factors. And honestly, the pricing changes both on the NetSuite side as well as on the third-party side all the time. But with that in mind, the ranges of prices, there's really no question that NetSuite WMS is going to be in a lower range compared to what else you could get. Another thing that for some clients is a major aspect is the fact that compared to a third-party app, the benefit of WMS is the fact that it is native. It is not an integration that you need to bolt on to the side of your existing system, especially if you've come on to NetSuite to avoid having a sort of a best of breed approach. Then you might not want to then turn around and have to get some other third-party app, whether for your inventory management, manufacturing, etc. So you would tend to look at something like WMS more favorably. And overall, I would just say that WMS is stable, it's functioning, and if it can fulfill your requirements, oftentimes it can be the best option for you. So that's what I would say. And just as a kind of an overview on the pros side, now let's take a look at the cons. And there are a few things to consider. First thing is that WMS is rigid. It is not a very flexible system. It's very difficult to customize things. Not that it's impossible, but it's time consuming. And time, when you're dealing with NetSuite and an implementation, usually equals money. So when you're looking at the system, even if it's just adding additional columns, putting in a necessary field, or deciding a certain page that you're forced to go through, you just don't want to deal with that because it's inefficient with how your warehouse operates. Well, if you need to do any of those things, in some cases, you simply will not be able to do them. But if it's things like adding columns or fields, yes, you can do them. But whereas in normal NetSuite, it's as easy as having someone who's honestly just watched some of my videos can go in and very quickly make custom forms and tabs and fields, all of these things. Not the same when you're dealing with NetSuite WMS. You need to have someone who is a trained consultant, can go in with SuiteScript and go through quite a bit of kind of jumping through hoops just to get even the simplest addition and customization put on through what I just walked you through earlier in this video, dealing with WMS. So that is something to think about. The next thing you do need to think with is if you not only need a more advanced inventory management tool, but also have some kind of manufacturing requirement, you're dealing with WIP and routing, work centers, discrete scheduling, these kinds of things, and you want to integrate that in with your, when I say WMS, I mean just a normal warehouse management system, whether that's NetSuite or a third-party alternative. This is not where NetSuite WMS shines. In fact, it's very limited in its manufacturing capabilities, and some of the third-party alternatives are much better in that regard. So that is one thing I would think with. If you have those more advanced manufacturing requirements, it pretty much, in my opinion, takes NetSuite's WMS off the table. Next thing I would bring up as a con is just the fact that I would not call it the most efficient or streamlined app. When the pickers are actually going through, just like I showed you in the video, you have to click all these buttons, the way they structure the UI, some of the features and the information they provide there, sometimes the speed in which you can go through a normal pick process, the way you can kind of streamline that process, it's fine, it's functioning with NetSuite WMS, but if you've ever interacted with some of the third-party alternatives, then you'll quickly find that they've just put a lot more intention into how do we make something that is going to be useful for the pickers. And so for anyone who's had to be in a warehouse and picking through things, you'll notice a pretty dramatic difference when you're dealing with NetSuite WMS compared to some of the other options. Now, the last thing I would bring up as a consideration is that there are certain features that NetSuite WMS simply cannot do. So for example, if you're dealing with license plating, which not all businesses do, but if that is a requirement of yours, it's simply not possible. Even if you are doing customizations, the system is not built to handle that. So you are going to be barred from that. If license plating is key to your business, you're going to have to look at one of the other options. All right, so those are the pros and the cons. Now let's talk briefly about the implementation process. First thing to keep in mind, if you go with an alternative option, those are implemented not by your core NetSuite team that's going to be doing your normal system implementation. The third-party software, those will be implemented by those teams. They will liaise with your team. So that's separate from NetSuite WMS implementations where it would need to be handled by your team. So you would want to make sure that you get consultants that are obviously not just familiar with NetSuite, but are specifically familiar with WMS. And those I would say are not common. Many consultants have zero familiarity with the system, and deliberately so. They just take a look at it and they go, listen, that's getting a little too complex for me. They stick to their own bread and butter. So you want to make sure you get a team that has minimally done one, hopefully multiple NetSuite WMS implementations satisfactorily. Now, even if you have someone that has that level of familiarity, I would generally say, and I would also add is also a good consultant, the range you should think with in doing an implementation, I would generally say on the low end, you're looking at 50 hours. So even if you're doing it with a very, very minimal setup, you really just want the mobile scanner and all the just kind of necessary implementation and configuration for WMS. That's really hitting that 50 mark. It's not that it takes 50 hours to set up. It might only take 4 hours to set up, but the discovery and data collection side, and then once it's configured, walking the clients through, making sure that they understand how to use it, UAT testing, all that, that's really where you can start to stack up hours. Now, that's for an easy, just the bare minimum, simplest WMS implementation. If you're looking at something much more comprehensive, I wouldn't say the peak in terms of everything that NetSuite WMS can do, because I've frankly not even seen someone try to dive that far, but what I would consider a pretty complex WMS setup with some customizations, that's where I would look more in the 100-hour range. Again, this is assuming you have good consultants and they're not learning WMS as a part of your implementation process, which you definitely want to avoid. So hopefully this has been able to give you some sort of an understanding of NetSuite's WMS. If you're interested, as I said earlier in this video, in checking out the full course where I dive into every different feature in the system as well as how to configure it, you can check out the link below. I'll have the link to my website with the WMS course I just released. And if you're interested in other adjacent subjects like inventory management, MRP, manufacturing, you'll find them all on my course website. And of course, if you found this particular video helpful, you can always feel free to like and subscribe to this particular video. So with all of that in mind, I hope to see you in the next video.